Thank you. And yeah, so what I was actually trying to say was that Christianity was mystifying. Uh, for example, it said that no human rationality was capable of understanding the world because of its belief in creationism. It said the world is created by God, and the logic of creation, the logic, or the rather, not the logic of creation is anywhere there. Apart from that, the logic of, not the logic, I'm getting the wrong word here. The uh, reason behind creation is something that human beings will never understand by using their own rationality, because human rationality is inferior to God's rationality. And what you created, you could not, for example, understand. Now, the thing to understand here is that the Christians were believers in the concept of faith and not reason or rationality. They believed in true knowledge being revelations made by God through the medium of prophets. And the whole of the Bible was supposed to be the wisdom of God. And if you challenged the wisdom of God, then the challenge was dealt with rather severely. As I had told you, the original Bible was quite a raunchy text. It had a fair deal of it had a fair deal of sex in it, and the biblical hermeneutics were used were used in order to uh, remove the sex content and make it sanitize that into some kind of a uh, some kind of an acceptable to all text. Now, what you must understand here is that in doing so, the uh, Christians created the concept of heresy, Heresy, heresy. And heresy essentially means nothing but defiance of God and the embracing of Satan or Lucifer, the fallen angel who was in charge of hell. So if you embraced heresy, then after death you went to hell, and souls had to be saved. Okay, not just human beings, but souls. Human souls had to be saved, and they had to be sent to God rather than to hell. Now, when you see this, just a minute, please. When you see this, what you realize is that the church was an institution that was more concerned with sin and non sin, and it wanted people to live their life virtuously. They changed the meaning of virtue. I think I told you this before, but just in case I didn't, or just in case you have forgotten, even if I did, I have forgotten if I've didn't mentioned it or not. Uh, Virtue is a word that comes from ancient Greece, Attic Greece, the province of Attica. And virtue essentially means excellence or meant excellence for the ancient Greeks. Uh, this particular idea was taken up by the Romans and especially Machiavelli, who called it virtu, didn't call it virtue, he called it virtu, virtu. And virtu was manliness because the root of vir is vir, which is there in Latin. And this word crept into Latin through Sanskrit. Okay. Virya, nirvirya, whatever it is, all those things. So vir became manliness. And he said, virtuous people are those who are manly, those who are brave. And fortune, which is something which is seen as capricious by the Christians, capricious in the sense that there was no way one can find out why it uh, favored some and did not favor others. Until, of course, the explanation about sin came. Those who are non-virtuous were likely to be non-fortunate, fortunous. Is that the word? Fortunate? No, they didn't have fortune. Let us just say that. So let me not speak some horrible brand of English, which is my own. So fortune was something which was called providence by the Christians, and providence was reserved for those who lived a virtuous life. Now, Machiavelli, being the great man that he is, uh, he essentially turned virtue into manliness again, into virtue, manliness, and fortune. He kept it capricious. He didn't say that fortune is not capricious, but he refused to use the word providence and instead used the word fortune in Italian as fortuna, Fortuna, fortuna. And he said fortuna is attracted by the manliness of those people who display their manliness and appear attractive to her. So virtue became the quality of manhood, and fortune became the quality of womanhood. And so he said, if you want to have fortune on your side, then you have to be manly. You have to be virtuous in that sense. Whereas, and it is from that that even today we have this saying, fortune favors the brave. That can be attributed to good old Niccolo Machiavelli. And if you look at the Christian meaning of virtue, virtue was living your life as per the principles of the Bible, not violating them. And they didn't use the word fortune, they continued to use the word providence. Providence went to those people who were uh, who were leading a pious and virtuous life. So there was no attribution of a gender or a sex to either virtue or to fortuna. as opposed to Machiavelli's virtue being manly and fortune being a womanly trait. Okay, so if you look at these things, therefore, you will see that Machiavelli is an important pivot, a very, very important pivot. Now, I'm going to get back to this point a little later, not now, but I'm going to make it now as a prefatory remark, which, just in case I miss, somebody note down and remind me that I had to speak about this in the next one or two classes. Okay. Dogs, dogs, dogs. I get so easily distracted, and here are these dogs. Uh, yeah, and uh, what should I say? Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm distracted. Uh, I said dogs and started thinking about that song "Dogs" by Pink Floyd, and it's fun. My distraction is proper and complete in every sense of the term. Yeah, so now what we have to understand is that from the biblical hermeneutics came up the notion of research. But again, please remember, I have to go back to Machiavelli because if you remember, I told you that for nearly a few centuries, the word politics or political or any of this doesn't figure. Once the Greek period, the Hellenistic Greek period is over, and once the Romans come into power, from then on, you don't really have uh, anything which is called politics, political thought, political philosophy. None, none. Okay, and I think I also told you this that Otto Gierke, who is such a great writer, I saw that his book was titled A Political Thought in the Middle Ages. And what I found is I decided that I have to crack this mystery. So I read that book from cover to cover, and I found that at not one place does uh, Gierke uses, not at one place does he use the word political. So probably it was put on the cover of the text for sales, or maybe it was a mistake of translation of Maitland. But if he had made that mistake of translation, then it should have appeared somewhere else in the text, and it doesn't appear anywhere else. And therefore, one has to conclude that it is a way of selling. This is capitalism at its best. Anyway, so this word political, politics, whatever, and whichever iteration of it, it kind of disappears for a very long time. And after centuries, it comes back thanks to Machiavelli. But right now, I'm not interested in talking about Machiavelli. I'm not interested in talking about uh, the whole idea of the political. I am here more today to talk to you about the idea of methodology and the idea of research. Now, uh, I told you when everything began, it began as search. Then, during the biblical hermeneutics, it became research. But I also told you that in the present era, people talk about research, but in many times it is just search. Okay. Uh, for example, if you take a look at my thesis of that I wrote for my PhD years ago. Uh, in that particular thing, it's more search than research. I searched out the reasons how music had played a political role. I didn't research. Nobody had uh, even made an attempt to do that anywhere, even abroad. And when I've been abroad and when people see, oh, you've done this, is it Indian music? And I say, I'm sorry, it's not, it's Western music, and most of it is USA anyway. Our democracy came into the USA thanks to music, uh, their version of democracy, which is oligarchy anyway. But at least the blacks who were till then uh, living in separation slowly started joining the mainstream of the society in the United States. So, if anybody asked me, did you do research or search? I'd say I did a search. It was just an inkling I had because I heard some lyrics. And from that, when I started looking at jazz, uh, and I started playing jazz music, I was completely fascinated by the fact that why is this fellow here? When I played jazz music, I understood the freedom that one felt from that because one doesn't have to uh, play in one key. So search and research are still relevant. It's not everything is not research. If you're looking at existentialism of Heidegger, which we were talking about yesterday, that in a way is research. Definitely what Foucault does in the name of archaeology is research, and this postmodern methodologies like structuralism, not structuralism, post-structuralism are actually disruptive, and even hermeneutics in the hands of Gadamer is a disruptive force. It's not a constructive force at all. So you see, the modern period saw the emergence of these two words, constructivism and disruptivism. Some people use it as destructionism, simply because of the fact that Heidegger's whole philosophy revolved around destruct, written with a K in German, which is destroy. Destroy what you see in front of you and search for the truth. So, um, therefore, what you have to understand is that both these streams of constructivism and destructionism, both of them are, or deconstructionism, all these are still around, though most of postmodernism, if you ask me, is dead. Nobody's talking about postmodernism like they did at one particular point. But when I come to postmodernism, I should tell you a few details about it, which are fascinating, which are all contradictory. There are several definitions of postmodernism, all of which are pretty contradictory. Anyway, so now let's go back to this particular point that Christians made, that if you did not create something, then you will never understand the logic or the reason behind that creation. Okay, that is uh, that is a claim made by the creationists or the Christians. And just when the Renaissance was happening and when Greek learning became available to people, the first university, one of the oldest universities in the world, We think they are Oxford universities. They are not. They, one of the oldest universities in the world is Padua, uh, and the University of Padua. And the people who researched there were called the Paduans, simply. Now, the fear of the church had not gone completely by this time, so they kept their names anonymous, but published their findings uh, as the Paduan school. Okay, so it is starting with the Paduan school that we have all these different schools coming in: the Frankfurt school, the Vienna school, sometimes also called the Vienna Circle. So these different, or the British Analytical School, all these things come from that particular usage of the Paduans, where they said they are members of the Paduan school. And they didn't say Paduan University, they just said Paduan school. And the Paduan school basically did pick up one proposition, which is, if I did not create something, will I never know the logic of how it works? No, Agastya Varun, shut up later. So at the end, um, so I knew you were going to do that. I knew. So I was ready this time. So the Paduans essentially, but I'll give you time, honestly speaking. Uh, Now, if anybody is finding my way I shut up to Varun, is because I treat him like my friend. He's my student. He's doing his PhD under me, but I treat him as my friend. Okay, he has been with me through many journeys in life together, including buying my Kawasaki W800, which I hope to ask a favor of him tomorrow or after the class. Anyway, so uh, what we were very considerate of me. Yes, Varun, you're right. I'm a considerate person. I may be fat, but fat people usually are considerate because they have they can lose as much fat as they can. Anyway, so we are talking about the Paduans asking themselves this question. The question being, uh, what if we did not create something? Can we never know its logic of creation, nor ever understand how it works? Now, funnily, that was the time because it was just about the time when the Renaissance began. People created a mechanical uh, clock, and as you might have seen, all things when they are created, they are huge. They're very, very big. Uh, I keep quoting this, so if I've quoted this before and you heard me say this thing before, please forgive me. But if any of you have not heard me say this, you can go to the Birla Science Museum. There is a huge room-sized computer donated by none other than the great Osmania University. And the memory of that, I think, is something like 100 KB or something like that. Okay. Now you have these little devices, the cell phones, even my wristwatch, which has more memory than that. Memory has now gone into gigabytes, not kilobytes anymore. So whatever it is, even terabytes. Yeah. Uh, Computers have gone on to terabytes. So somebody had created this whole big clock. The Paduans took up the challenge to try and understand the clock. So they said, this is not a clock we created. We don't know how it has been created. Now, how is it that we can know what to do with that particular toy? Okay, so what they did is they took recourse to the methodology which every child basically uses in order to understand something. Have you ever seen children? If you give them something, they first put it in the mouth. Okay? Mouth. Why? Because the lips are the most sensitive part of the human body. They are the most sensitive part of the human body. They can feel things which other parts of the body cannot feel. So when they try to understand what something is, they take it to their lips. And if you know the story of Helen Keller, who was deaf, dumb, and blind, the way she learned language, the way she learned to speak, was when her teacher basically used his finger on her lips to make her understand what is what. So Helen Keller's story is something. No, 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 not organ fixation. Uh, Come on, Varun, stop being naughty. Huh? Please stop being naughty. Okay, ask your doctor.
No, I just had that general doubt. I wasn't being naughty.
Oral fixation. Really? You didn't know what
Not
oral?
not this one. I'm talking with the Paduan school.
Yeah, tell me.
See, the doubt is more about understanding stuff just by reading the name. Now, normally these names are ascribed to schools of thought or groups of people post their existence. So, when you're talking about the Paduan school, is it something that later people categorize them as a school, or did they consciously refer to themselves as a school, as in like a club or a school or whatever?
They call themselves the Paduan school, and you are misinformed if you think that uh, the names of schools come in posthumously. No, they don't. For example, the Frankfurt School, starting with Horkheimer, Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, uh, then for some days in that you had also Herbert Marcuse, and then the great ivory tower philosopher who goes by the name of Jürgen Habermas. He's still alive, by the way. And they called themselves the Frankfurt School because uh, they were working in the University of Frankfurt, and maybe they didn't want to be called Frankfurters, so to preempt people from you uh, calling them things like Frankfurters, they basically call themselves Frankfurt School.
No, but the Paduan school had an imperative to call themselves by that name because they, like you said, they wanted to remain anonymous.
Yes,
But in this case, it's more a thematic connection that they feel. Is it like the Frankfurt School and all, or the Vienna Circle, or what?
there is a thematic connection in every school. I mean, even if you take the American pragmatist school, uh, right from John Dewey to Richard Rorty, there is a thematic connection. And there is a thematic connection even among the Paduans because they're all working together. They're all working together. Whereas if you take the case of the Frankfurt School, or if you take the case of the American Pragmatic School, one proved to be an inspiration for the other, but we don't have this evidence of them having done collaborative work. It is also called the critical school. And it's called the critical school because it basically criticized or it tried to be critical of Marxist theory and not necessarily practice. They said Marxist practice didn't happen simply because of the fact that there is something wrong with Marxist theory. Okay, so that even though the critical theory or critical school is attributed to these people, the first known critical theorist is the Hungarian Marxist Georgi Lukács. Georgi is written Lukács, Lukacs, but pronounced Lukács because S is pronounced in Hungarian as sh and C as ch. So Lukács. But everybody simply says Lukács. So it's up to you what you want to call him. You can even call him Lukács. I don't think they are going to take trouble to get our names right. So let's not worry too much about that. Anyway, so there is a thematic connection everywhere. There is a thematic connection everywhere. And the difference between the Paduans and the other examples that I've given you, and that doesn't mean that there are no other schools. There are other schools. There is a Cartesian school. There are various different schools, but this particular school is different from the other schools simply because of the fact that it is a team of people working together to try and disprove or to try and see if the Christians were right in saying that if you create something, you did not basically what should I say? You did not basically uh, understand. You were incapable of understanding that. Now, if you take, yeah, thank you. And if you take what the Paduans did, I told you, they took what children do. You give a child a toy, okay? A child below a certain age, say something like 4 years or something like that. If you give a toy to a certain child, that what does that child try to do? The child tries to break things open, tries to pull it out. When he's very young, he'll just use the mouth. But later on, he'll use his hands, he'll use the mouth, he'll use whatever is at his disposal to break the thing. Why do they want to break it? They want to break it because they want to see what is inside it. And it's a natural curiosity. You want to see how that thing works. So, a child who we say is destructive is actually not a destructive child. A child who's trying to break things apart is a child who should technically be called a what do you say a precocious child who's trying to already understand what something is and how is it that it is working in a certain manner. So that is one aspect. And the other aspect that you need to understand is that so the what did the Paduans do? The Paduans simply went and unscrewed the clock. So What they did is they took out every single component of a clock and they'll put them aside. They opened every single component. They noted which way was what being, uh, in which position was a particular part. They put that down and they noted that down and put the parts down. So this is a disassembly. Okay, so disassembly, or if you like, actually the old English which says dissembly, which is the opposite of assembly. But many people now prefer to use disassembly because of the fact that they say this has already been assembled, so you're disassembling something that is assembled. Well, whatever. You can use whichever word. You can use disassembly or simply dissembly. Either of them will be fine. Now, if you basically look at what they did while they were disassembling was to resolve how many parts are there in the clock, how many uh, ways in which are different parts connected. What are the parts that are connected? What are the moving parts and what are the non moving parts? All this they made a note of. And what did they do after that? They reassembled the clock. Okay, so they reassembled the clock. They basically put it back together as they had made notes as to which part went where. They put it back together. So, what happened? At the end of the process of reassembly, they had, in the place of what was originally an unintelligible complex. Some people like to use the word whole. I would ask you to refrain from using the word WHOLE, whole, and use the word complex, because a complex is something that is a coming together of many different things. And if you basically uh, look at what you will see in the clock, is that there is an attempt to uh, first remove all the parts together. So you have the needles, you have the dial, behind which you have pulleys, gears, threads, chains, a pendulum, all these things. And they're all connected to work together in harmony. So this is actually called a mechanical solidarity. Okay, a mechanical solidarity, because all the parts, they are not organic, they are not like organisms, they are mechanisms. A wheel has its own existence, even if you don't have a car. Okay, if there is a wheel somewhere, you don't have to say there must be a car to which this wheel belongs. Not necessary. Somebody could have just made a wheel just for the pleasure of making a wheel. Similarly, somebody could have made a joystick of an aeroplane. Okay, I don't know why it's called a joystick though. I'd be terribly afraid to use that while if I ever flew a plane. I can't fly a plane. I can't fly in a plane. I'm terribly claustrophobic, and once I sit in a plane, I'll be popping pills to keep my mind from working terribly hard to see how we will crash. So My comfort zone is about 2 hours of flight. After that, it's a huge, huge discomfort zone. But I have flown 13 hours also. So that's a different issue. So what happens, therefore, is that some people enjoy uh, removing things and putting them back together, and the Padwans were like that. Now, when they removed the parts, disassembled it, that process is called the complex being simplified. Okay. So, what do you mean that the complex is being simplified? Which means that now there is this mechanical solidarity that is working together as one particular mechanism. Now, when you take out all these, you get independent parts. You get the pulleys, you get the gears, you get the needles, you get the dial, you get the pendulum, all of which are independent. Okay. Different parts are made differently and they are all brought together and put together. And in doing so, they have created a clock that tells the time. I've simplified the example. The example is actually rather complicated because you also have to factor in how does this particular working of the clock reflect correct time? How does it reflect correct time? Okay, that is one thing that I am conveniently ignoring because it'll become otherwise too much of a class in physics, and physics is not my forte. So if you look at it this way, so you move through resolution, which is disassembly of the unintelligible complex, and you reassemble it. And through the reassembly, you move to the intelligible complex. You move to the intelligible complex, which means what you didn't understand before is something you understand now. So, this experimentation process is also called breaking up of a complex to rock bottom simples. Mind you, you have to divide something till such a time that it cannot be divided anymore. If you try to divide it, it will break. And by breaking, it will not serve any purpose. So those are called rock bottom simples. Okay. And just in case you think that this has been something that is used only in the case of devices, you will see in Rene Descartes, you must be very familiar with cogito ergo sum, which is I think, therefore I am. And it's not as simple as it seems. This is also called radical skepticism. It's called radical skepticism because Descartes is trying to ask himself this question: how do I know that I exist? Okay, so you have to start a thought process. And in this thought process, you have to start breaking the complexity of your existence into its simple elements till you reach the rock bottom simple. Okay, so if the unintelligible part here is how do I know I exist? Then the intelligible part is taking out layers and layers of thought. Okay, I am not going to go deep into this again because I love to get carried away by these things. Maybe I'll think about it, and if necessary, I'll do this in a little more detail on Monday. But right now, my clock says 7:23, and I don't want to get into the example of how the uh, you know delamination of layers happens here. So you say, I am here sitting in a chair. How do I know I'm sitting in a chair? I know I'm sitting in a chair because I can feel the chair. I know that I'm sitting here because I'm also able to see my reflection in the camera, through the camera on the screen. And I know that apart from the very naughty Mr. Agastya Varun, you also have the ultra sincere Miss Mrs. Sorry, Sonia Raju, the very sincere Sharat Chandra, and my great student Maria, and Padma has gone up. No, Sharat has gone. Right. I thought Padma didn't want to be described as anything. Padma, another great student of mine, very attentive in every class. I'm sure she remembers all these things that I had taught in class. Do you, Padma?
Yes, sir, I do.
Sorry?
Yes, sir, I do remember.
Yeah, she does remember. See, that's the advantage of having. So the thing, therefore, is that now, if you break down your thought process, you have to come down to how do I know that I'm thinking? You have to come down to that particular proposition. How do I know that I'm thinking? That is the rock bottom simple. If I don't know that I'm thinking, then why am I saying that I'm thinking? Okay? How do I know I'm thinking cannot be broken up anymore. If you say, I don't know how I know that I'm thinking, then you are not aware of your existence. Or if you say, I know that I'm thinking because I'm sitting in the chair, you've gone back to the top of the pyramid of questions, which you have to come back again. So the rock bottom simple is I know that I exist because I'm thinking. So thought, or my thought, is the proof of, um, my uh, ability to know that I exist. So I think my thought is what makes me know that I exist. Without, if I couldn't think, I wouldn't know. So Descartes created what is called the Cartesian dualism, which is that mind and body are two different things. They can exist independently of each other. The difference is cogitation or thinking is the property of the mind. Okay. And so the mind can exist without the body and still understand that it exists. Whereas if it is the case of the body is not capable of cogitation. It doesn't have a cogitative function anywhere built into it. So it cannot think of itself. So it might exist, but it doesn't know that it exists. This is Cartesian dualism. Okay, by the time we come to Hegelian phenomenology, I'll try to answer the question of how many different things is Hegel actually answering. Hegel is answering Cartesian dualism. He says that is complete nonsense. He's talking about Kantian antinomies, which he says are complete nonsense. So Hegel is not taking on one thinker, he's taking on several thinkers in one go and trying to, in the phenomenology of the spirit, he's trying to explain how all these are idiotic constructions and what the real construction should be. So he's not a fan of Cartesian radical skepticism. But there you can see the parallels between the resolutive compositive method, which precedes Rene Descartes, by the way. So you can actually see the uh, uh, connection between the two. So it wasn't only left up to the disassembly of things, but it also went up to the disassembly of thought. Methodically, you are using a method, you're not doing it indiscriminately. The difference between a child trying to break something open and trying to see how it functions, and how it is different from uh, how the uh, Paduans were carefully uh, separating things, not breaking them up, separating parts that were connected. That is the method. While there is no method to the child and his activity, there is a method to what these people are doing. And if we come to Rene Descartes is another person who is definitely doing what the Paduans did with a clock. He's doing it with his own mind. And Descartes has a reason to do it. He's not simply a radical skeptic. What Descartes was trying to do was to synthesize religious thinking with non religious thinking. The Paduans weren't trying to synthesize religious thinking with non religious thinking. In fact, they were trying to debunk the notions of religious thinking. Okay, but Descartes is not doing that. Descartes is trying to synthesize both them. And he was hoping that his way of teaching would, like, Jesus' teaching became the uh, Holy Roman Empire under Emperor Constantine. He was hoping that some ruler will pick up his idea of rationality and synthesize it with Christianity. And instead of saying that Christianity is based in superstition and it is based in a disbelief of what is reality, he is trying to answer that particular question. So I'll stop here today. This is not the end of methodology. We will be progressing with methodology on Monday, as is the case. Manasa, you have arrived at Manasa, you have arrived at the end of the class, I'm afraid. It's 6:30 to 7:30, not 7:30 onwards. Anyway, all right. So we will continue with this whole thing of methodology, because with time, the whole idea of method became more and more. Methodology is a usage which is more, a lot more newer. The old way of looking at it is method. Okay, so once you have a method, which is logical, then you say it is methodological. And that is how you have the word methodology. So I'll see you on Monday at 6:30. Saturdays I'd like to take off, if you don't mind. I'm sure you don't mind. I'm sure you'll be wondering, when will he take off? Forever. I hope that day will also come soon. When I take off a race, I really want to take off. I don't want to be on the ground and pretend that I'm taking off. I really want to take off and crash. So thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am. Very kind of you to say that to me. So thank you very much. I'll see you on Monday. From Monday onwards, I will not put this in each of your threads. I'll only put it on the social sciences research and discussion community page. Now, if there is anyone else other than Agastya Varun who wants to have discussions, we can set one day aside sometime for having discussions. Agastya Varun is a dogmatic arguer. So I say these things because he's such a nice fellow. He's really a nice fellow. Very considerate. Very, very considerate. So thank you very much, all of you. Sorry, Varun, I said.
No, that's okay. Actually, once you're done with the class, I had one more doubt.
I'm done with the class.
Okay. So I was just going through, I did a Google search. I was just going through the resolutive compositive method, which you just referenced to at the very end of the class. And for some reason, a lot of the initial results link it with Thomas Hobbes.
No. Thomas Hobbes has also used the resolutive compositive method.
But it didn't start with him, right?
No way. It started with Godwins.
Why do you think it is linked so much with Thomas Hobbes? At least the initial results, the important one.
I'll tell you why it is linked with Thomas Hobbes. Because the state of nature in Hobbes is an imaginative state of nature, which is based in a real state of society. Okay, which he doesn't call a state of society, he calls it a state of nature in which neither society nor state exist. And let me not go too deep into it because I will be discussing it. And even John Locke uses it. So it is an experiment that he conducts using the resolutive compositive method. The resolutive compositive method, as used by the Paduans, is not experimental in the same sense as it is in the case of Hobbes. So I'll talk about Hobbes.
So Hobbes is, can we call it a thought experiment?
What experiment?
A thought experiment.
Yeah, it is.
But the Paduans, how different are they from Hobbes here?
They are actually working on a tangible piece of mechanism, something that is available to you to touch, to feel, to see. It is all based in the senses, right? And I talk about the resolutive compositive method because later empiricism embraces this methodology in order to deny thought experiments.
Okay.
That is why I mentioned this before. Okay, we'll come to that as well.
Thank you.
That as well. All right. So see you on Monday. And Varun, I'll give you a call. I have some work with you tomorrow.
Okay? Right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Please don't take what I said of Varun too seriously. He's a very nice chap. I depend on him for a lot of things, and he helps me a lot. And so What a joke, he says. Anyway, he sees me as a joke. Fine. That's also all right. I am a joke, actually. All right. Thank you very much. See you on Monday at 6:30 p.m. Madam.
See you, Professor. Thank you, sir.
Yep, Maria. Madam Manasa has left before I could address her. All right. So, okay then. See you at 6:30 Monday evening. Thank you very much. Very nice of you to attend. Thank you.